say they're using the term blockchain, implying that it's like Bitcoin's blockchain, but really it's their own blockchain, it's their own network, and it shouldn't even be called a blockchain because there's certain players that have to be on the network in order for it to be a blockchain. But these banks are trying to develop their own blockchain without wallet providers, without nodes, without miners. They're trying to do their own private networks, their own private blockchains. And that's the opposite of what Bitcoin is. Bitcoin is completely open, so the term is decentralized. These banks and governments are trying to build their own centralized networks and their own centralized blockchains because they can control that, right? And that's why they're kind of scared about Bitcoin, is because they can't control it. And that's because it's decentralized, so it's spread out. Anyone in the world who has a computer and internet access can be part of the Bitcoin network, or even a phone. That's another reason why it's big. There's a lot of people, yeah.
I wonder if they're trying to like co-opt the language so that blockchain becomes associated with, you know, government and banks, and this just kind of,
You're 100% right.
you know, people forget about why it started in the first place.
100% right. And so, because of the mainstream media, they control a lot of what people hear and see every day. So, yes, they start using the term blockchain and throwing around the term blockchain. So now, it happens quite often where people will come to me and talk about blockchain this, blockchain that. And I ask them, you know, like, what is a blockchain? Like, what are you talking about? And 9 times out of 10, it's wrong. It's not the blockchain that they should be talking about. So you're right, they've thrown around the term, and yeah, they're trying to get people thinking blockchain is a certain thing when it isn't. But anyways, it's not new. Like, this isn't something new that they've done before. Which is why it's very important to have these meetups, so you can have different people with different opinions giving their opinion on Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies. Because if you just look at mainstream media, you're not going to get the right information. So what these banks are doing is they're actually building off of another cryptocurrency. So has anyone here heard of Ethereum? Mm-hmm. Okay, so what that is an example of a centralized blockchain. But it's also programmable, so you can do your own things on this blockchain. And what you're actually seeing, the main use case coming out of this Ethereum blockchain, is you're seeing other cryptocurrencies come about. And they come about by having an ICO, which is an initial coin offering. And it's the most scammiest thing out there. It's like network marketing or pyramid schemes, if anyone's heard of that. They're initially offering, so what they do is they offer some Ethereum tokens. Ethereum has their own cryptocurrency, and with their blockchain you can create your own tokens called ERC20 tokens. And with these tokens you can create your own cryptocurrencies. So there's thousands of other cryptocurrencies out there now. A lot of them are just built on the Ethereum network. There's other ones that have their own blockchains, don't get me wrong, like Monero. It's an anonymous currency. But most of them happen on the Ethereum network. Hi.
Is that me? Crypto?
Yeah, you're here. We were just, to catch you up.
Sorry,
No, it's okay. We were just talking about how we're seeing big banks and even governments start to build their own blockchains and their own networks. How new are you to Bitcoin?
Me?
Yeah.
I have a few buddies doing it. So
Okay.
I see that's like schools are starting to accept it in the States. I've seen like even like I think Amazon, a couple other outlets are starting to use like Bitcoin and accepting other cryptocurrencies.
Awesome. So you've heard the term blockchain.
Blockchain, yeah.
You've heard of Ethereum.
Ethereum, yeah.
Okay. So that's what we were just kind of talking about. We were just talking about how banks are starting to kind of use the term blockchain frivolously, which is their blockchains are different than Bitcoin's blockchain. So I was just kind of trying to differentiate between Bitcoin blockchain and Ethereum networks and stuff like that. So yeah, and I was also mentioning on the Ethereum network you can create your own tokens, and so a lot of these cryptocurrencies coming out are just creating their own tokens on the Ethereum network and having these initial coin offerings. That's what ICO stands for. It's like a token sale. And so they're selling their coins, and they're trying to say they solved a problem and whatnot, but 99% of the time they're not solving any problems. They're just there to make money off the token. So you can invest in these other cryptocurrencies as well that are ERC20 tokens off of the Ethereum network, or even other cryptocurrencies that aren't based off of the Ethereum network. You can invest in them, but I've always said here at these meetups, it's very high risk versus reward.
For which ones?
For, I'd say any other cryptocurrency, because they're always centralized. There's no other cryptocurrency or network out there that is like Bitcoin's and is decentralized in nature. And that goes for everything, like the people developing it, the merchants, the exchanges, miners, nodes, users, wallet providers. It's as decentralized as you can get. Whereas these other cryptocurrencies, it's very centralized. It comes to a point, and there's people or groups that can control these other cryptocurrencies. So that's why in the long term, when I invest long term. Like I don't want to get stressed monthly looking at prices and stuff like that. I've been studying Bitcoin since 2011, and I just look at the price like once a year. Well, I look at it a lot more often, but if I were to tell new people, I just say look at it like once a year. It's a long-term investment, but I've never lost it. Yeah, like since 2000, I didn't start till 2013, 14. I was more so researching in 2011.
Millionaire now, right?
Yeah, it's funny, you know, at the time, 2011, if I started mining Bitcoins, has anyone heard the term of mining Bitcoins?
Heard of it, yeah.
Okay.
It's usually like labs, right? They use their computer systems around it.
Exactly, so the Bitcoin network, what it is, it's a computer program, it's like software, and it runs on a protocol. And a protocol is just instructions that computers follow. So anyone that downloads the Bitcoin protocol, the Bitcoin network, that's what you can do. You can just download the network and you'll have all the history of all the transactions that have happened on the Bitcoin network.
How do you download?
You just literally go online, and my email's not up there yet, but it's really easy. Like you just go online and you type in how to download Bitcoin blockchain, and there's probably tons of YouTube tutorials, stuff online, but it involves running a node. So I wouldn't suggest just the everyday person to go and download Bitcoin blockchain. It's not your job yet. I would suggest you get comfortable using a Bitcoin wallet, because you need that to hold Bitcoins and send and receive Bitcoins. So if you want to get involved in Bitcoin, you're eventually going to have to go to an exchange, and you're going to have to buy Bitcoins that way. So you use your fiat money, your paper money, Canadian money. There's various ways, like interact e-transfers, you can do cash deposits at banks, or you can set up your bank account, which I don't recommend, because there's ways to buy Bitcoin without giving away like any of your information. At the most, a cell phone number. But that's the beauty of the Bitcoin network. There's options. You know, you can use centralized exchanges, or you can use more decentralized exchanges, which you don't have to give away as much information. But yeah, once you buy Bitcoins, you're going to have to get used to holding them in a Bitcoin wallet. So I don't suggest downloading the blockchain, but the point of that was just to say, at the time, if I went on my laptop in 2011 and I typed on YouTube how to mine Bitcoins, I could have used my laptop computer power at the time to mine Bitcoin. That's how small the network is. Because and the reason why you mine Bitcoin is because there's only 21 million Bitcoins. That's all there will ever be, is 21 million Bitcoins. So miners actually use their computer power to try and mine Bitcoin. And what it is using your computer power to try and figure out these problems, these computer problems. And so the more computer power you have, the better chance you have of solving these computer problems, which gives you a reward. that reward, so there's only 21 million Bitcoins. At the beginning, and when Bitcoin started in 2009, the reward for mining a Bitcoin, 1 Bitcoin, was 50 Bitcoins. Now, for 1 Bitcoin, it's almost 10,000 Canadian dollars, but you don't have to buy 1 Bitcoin, you can buy like 0.1 Bitcoin, 0.001, and all the way to a million decimal places. But, so, at the time, I could have used my laptop computer power to mine these Bitcoins, and so around 2011, it would have been still around 50 Bitcoin. But that reward, 50 Bitcoin, it actually gets halved every 4 years, so it kind of creates a deflationary currency in a sense. So if I had used my laptop computer power to mine Bitcoin, I could have got like whole Bitcoins on my computer just by using my computer power. But now if I tried to mine Bitcoin with my computer, it's absolutely impossible, because the amount of computer power around the world right now that is trying to mine Bitcoin. There's like warehouses full of computer processors all over the world. It's nuts.
So if you're mining, do you have to do some sort of like calculations or know like some sort of programming, or do you just like how does that work?
You do have to know a little bit to get set up, but there's just hardware you buy that you would set up to mine Bitcoin. But yeah, you don't have to know too much, but you do have to know a little bit. But
You have to be like a software.
no, like honestly, it's pretty easy. But the point I'm trying to say is like it's not worth it for anyone to try and mine nowadays to get to even having a chance of getting a reward that the Bitcoin network offers, because you're going against all this other computer power out there in the world, and there's so much computer power, it's mind-boggling, that I tell people do not get involved in mining Bitcoin anyway. The chance is so slim for you to get any reward. So that's why I just tell people to, if you're looking to get in Bitcoin, just invest, buy the Bitcoin directly, and just hold on to it. It's a long-term investment, so 6 months, a year, you look at it. And as I was trying to say in 2013, since I started investing, if I were to just look back every year, I would have won every year. I would have never lost. So because Bitcoin is decentralized, anyone can join the network, anyone can be part of this network, it's stayed the same since 2009. Nobody has been able to change the Bitcoin network, which you can't say for any other cryptocurrency. Ethereum has been changed multiple times, and it's Bitcoin's biggest competitor. So that's actually Bitcoin's biggest, or its most valuable, like its value proposition. Its most valuable reason for existing is that it's sound money, but it's also a network that you can't change. So if you're using this money on the network, you know that it'll be secure for a long time. So that's why I invest in Bitcoin as much as possible, because I know that the developers are developing on the Bitcoin network all the time, every day, every hour, and they're making it better. And they're not, at the beginning, they weren't doing it for selfish reasons, they were developing for selfless reasons. And that's another reason why Bitcoin is so great, because you have all these selfless people developing on the Bitcoin network, and you don't have that. You can't say the same for other centralized cryptocurrencies or centralized networks. There's always some sort of selfish reason and a reason for profit, but Bitcoin, the Bitcoin network, it's more beneficial if you collaborate and work together rather than compete. But so the point I was just trying to make is it's getting better every year because it's so decentralized. So that's why I'm comfortable investing in Bitcoin every year rather than other cryptocurrencies, because I know it's getting better and I know people are working hard to make it better every day. Now, I'll give you guys an example before we just kind of go into like a general question and answer. type discussion of when someone or a group of people tried to change the Bitcoin network, but it couldn't be changed. And that really is the most important application. It's killer app. That's Bitcoin's killer app, is that its immutability, is that it can't be changed. So, because that's what you want in money, right? You don't want people or the group of people that control the network to control the money supply. Right now we're all part of a network, right? Like every day we use paper money, Canadian money, and it's all part of a system, it's all part of a network. And it connects to the US dollar, because the US dollar is the world's reserve currency. Who knows who controls the printing of the US dollar?
Federal Reserve.
Right. Now, is the Federal Reserve, okay, the point I was just going to say is the Federal Reserve is a private company. So this private company controls the supply of money that affects the whole world. Every currency or asset bases their value off of the US dollar. And then a private organization controls this US dollar. So why would you want to use that network? I do not want to use that network, so I'm using a network that I know people, like everyday people, are using and building and making better. So I'm comfortable using that for my store of value. Obviously, every day, day-to-day stuff, I have to use my paper money. But for right now, I use Bitcoin as a store of value. So I don't use it as a medium of exchange or a unit of account, which are the three functions of money. I just use it as a store of value right now, because it's not really meant for doing everyday purchases right now. So an example of how Bitcoin tried to get taken over. In order for this network to change, in order for a blockchain to upgrade, the network has to reach consensus. So when I was saying before, you can download the Bitcoin blockchain, by running a node, so you essentially have a piece of hardware that is able to download like 10 to 20 gigabytes, and you download the Bitcoin blockchain. This has the history of all the transactions that have happened on the network, but it also has the history of all the computational power that went into securing those transactions on the network. So if you wanted to change the Bitcoin network, you'd have to compute more power than Bitcoin's accumulative history of computer power that has been used to download transactions and secure the network. Because remember how I was saying before, you use your computer power to mine Bitcoin, but at the same time, you're actually securing the network by validating the transactions that go into the blockchain. Does that make a little sense? I'm just trying to connect how nodes and miners work together on the Bitcoin blockchain. And honestly, it's a lot to take in, but if you guys are able to at least connect the dots a little bit, you'll know the difference between what goes into Bitcoin's blockchain and other blockchains. So, and it also leads into the example I'm trying to give of when Bitcoin tried to get taken over. So, if you have a node, this piece of hardware, you can just download the Bitcoin blockchain, and it has all the history of the transactions that happen on the Bitcoin network. So it's about almost 15, 20 gigabytes. I'm not exactly sure, but that's the amount. And so if you wanted to, and so I was mentioning, if you wanted to change it, you had to change the history of the blockchain. And in that history, it has all the transactions and all the computer power as well. So in order to upgrade a blockchain, the Bitcoin blockchain, it's like software. So in order to make the software better, in order to upgrade it, you have to have all the nodes involved in the network reach consensus. So consensus is when everybody agrees on the same thing, which has never happened before. Bitcoin actually solved that problem. So there's two problems in money that existed before Bitcoin came out. One was a double spending problem, which is, right now you can print money really easy. It's really easy to double spend US dollars. You can just print more of it, but it's impossible to do that with Bitcoin. You cannot double spend Bitcoin. And then the other problem it solved, it was more so a computer science problem, but it's called the Byzantine generals problem. It's a mouthful, but all it means is there was no way for a group of people outside of a room to agree on something. So right now, it's really easy for me to walk up to you and give you money, gold, whatever. We can make that exchange. We don't need a third party. Or if there's even two groups of people trying to agree on something, it's really easy to do it in a room. But anytime you try to do it outside of a room, you had to use a third party. And that's how banks got started, that's how credit cards, PayPal, all that stuff, because all those third parties, because anytime you tried to do something outside of a room, you had to trust the third party. But Bitcoin solved that problem and allowed for what is called a consensus network, which is a way for people to agree on something and they don't have to know these other people. And so the way you do that by agreeing on something is by making sure that everybody is running the same software and the same up-to-date software. So if you're running that up-to-date software, you're running the state of the Bitcoin network. And you know that if you're running the state of the Bitcoin network and it's the most up-to-date version, it means it's validated by all the peers. And if it's validated by all the peers, you know that it's true and it is worth what it is and it's secure, blah, blah, blah. The point is that it's true and that nobody changed it. So in order to upgrade, you have to make changes to these networks. And to make changes, you have to get everybody to agree. So there was a point in time, it was 2016, that an upgrade to the Bitcoin network was trying to happen. Now, as I was mentioning before, it's hard to make changes on the network. You have to get all these people to agree, and that's never been done before in the history of humanity ever, is to have all these group of people agree on something, and it being a vast majority. Like, a consensus is a large majority. So when Bitcoin first started, it was great as a store of value, but eventually it has to get to the point of a medium exchange so that it can allow for more transactions on the network. In order to do that, it obviously has to upgrade. So what it did is that it was trying to upgrade to what was called segregated witness, and it's called SegWit for short. So a BIP was proposed, BIP, Bitcoin Improvement Proposal. If you guys look up online, there's hundreds of BIPs that were all proposed by a person or a group to try and improve the Bitcoin network. So anyone can create a BIP and release it. And if people see that it works, it makes sense, more people will use it and will implement it into the Bitcoin network. So it'll upgrade as part of the blockchain. So the network was trying to upgrade to add this BIP called SegWit, which basically allowed for more transactions by having less bloat in the blockchain. So before it costed quite a bit and it took up quite a bit of space to make transactions, but this is basically just allowing for more transactions involving less space. So essentially cheaper Bitcoin transactions as well. So it's an opportunity to upgrade the system. So at the time, miners were the only ones who had power to change the network. So when SegWit came out, miners were the ones who voted on how to change the network. So it wasn't like everyone using the network had a say in this change that was going to happen to the Bitcoin network, right? And most of these people got involved in the Bitcoin network because they don't want something to be changed, right? They want it to be use something that couldn't be changed, and it was immutable. So there was a problem. I said Bitcoin is the most completely decentralized, but at the time, it was centralized for the miners, because at the time, miners were able to control how changes were made on the Bitcoin network. So that was a problem. Bitcoin was a little bit centralized at that time. And so that was kind of a bad thing, because you kind of saw two Bitcoins being created. You can essentially copy the Bitcoin code and create your own Bitcoin and call it something else, but it's not the same thing at all. So that's what was essentially happening. And so you started to see miners basically having a say in how the Bitcoin network was going to change. Now, here's how it didn't change. This is the point I was trying to make. I hope you guys all kind of grasp what I was saying about nodes and miners. Now, any user is able to run a node. That's the beauty of the Bitcoin network. It's very cheap and quite easy to find a way to run a node. Now, another BIP, at that time when this problem was happening, it was a little bit centralized, another BIP came about. This anonymous person, just the same way Bitcoin came out. Bitcoin came out from an anonymous group or person. Nobody still knows who it was today, but they just released this software freely and gave people a chance to use it. And so the same thing happened. An anonymous person wrote a Bitcoin improvement proposal and just put it out there, and it was called BIP 148, and it stood for user activated soft fork. So in order to change Bitcoin, you have to go through, now I'm talking software and programming, you have to go through a soft fork to upgrade the system. So it's just picture, a fork happening because change is happening, but it has to be a soft fork, whereas a hard fork is essentially starting a new Bitcoin. And it's a separate coin, a separate currency. So at the time, to change it, miners had control, and it was through a miner activated hard fork, which was bad. It was essentially creating a new coin. So this person came out with BIP 148, and it was user activated soft fork, and it was a way for users to decide on where the Bitcoin network should go, which is amazing. There was this problem, and it's kind of like politics and governments all over again. It's like, okay, here we go. They're just going to throw their money at it. They're going to decide the future for the people. I don't know about you guys, but anytime someone thinks of a good idea, the kind of competition takes over and money kind of takes over, like especially if it is a threat to the government. But so that's what you kind of saw happening. There was this group that was trying to take over the Bitcoin network, but this user came up with this idea that allowed people to vote with their nodes. So essentially what happened was the majority of people with their nodes voted on which Bitcoin network is Bitcoin. And so it had to reach a consensus, and it was 80%. And so if that's what BIP 148 was at the beginning, it was trying to get a majority of people to agree. And so in the end, around 80% of people agreed on the state of the network. And so that's how Bitcoin stayed the way it was. And that's how Bitcoin kind of fought off centralized groups that tried to change it. At the time, they did have more money, and mining was getting centralized, so you were able to change Bitcoin. But because of Bitcoin's decentralized nature, it was able to stay the way it was able to stay immutable. So nobody has been able to change the Bitcoin network yet. And honestly, it's just getting harder and harder each year. So because
Are there like any improvements that can be made though?
absolutely, like that's what I was just gonna kind of try and say. At the time, there was kind of a problem, but this problem got solved because of Bitcoin's decentralized nature and because of its voluntary nature. So anyone can just come up with ideas, and if it makes sense to the majority of people, to the consensus, the majority of people, and it comes to consensus, then it will get upgraded into the system. And that's what's happening. There's so many BIPs being created, there's so many improvements that are happening on the Bitcoin network, and it's getting more and more every day than it used to be, like exponentially. It's really...
But no improvements have been made though, because not everyone has reached consensus.
No, I was trying to say, at that time, because of BIP 148, it was able to improve and upgrade this SegWit that I was talking about to allow for more transactions and cheaper.
Oh, okay.
So that was what I was trying to say, was it was hard to make changes, but because of BIP 148 and that anonymous user that came up with this idea, people liked it, and they said, okay, let's run this on our software. So majority consensus amount of people on the Bitcoin network were running this SegWit software. So that's how it made the change. It basically, BIP 148 gave a chance for anyone to vote. At the time, miners could vote on how to change the Bitcoin network, and mining was centralized. BIP 148 allowed essentially users to vote and change the state of the Bitcoin network. So you can imagine it's better to have everybody vote rather than just people who had more money and skin in the game at the time. So Bitcoin was able to change, it was able to upgrade, and I've honestly noticed the difference when using Bitcoin. Like, it has become a lot cheaper, faster, better. So it actually was able to upgrade, and so it was a fantastic win for the Bitcoin network.
So do you think Bitcoin will ever be like a medium of exchange?
Yeah, absolutely. So right now, that's kind of what SegWit was. It was an upgrade to allow more improvements to happen in order for it to become a medium of exchange. So SegWit wasn't the only upgrade that needed to happen in order for it to become a medium of exchange, but it's kind of like the foundational step that had to happen. So now what you're seeing is there's so many different improvements out there. Like if you look up Lightning Network, that's supposed to be Bitcoin's layer 2, the next step, in order for Bitcoin to be a medium of exchange. But it hasn't reached consensus yet. You can still use the Lightning Network for extremely cheap, fast transactions, but I haven't done it yet because it hasn't reached consensus yet, so it's not 100% safe. So
my question is it going to be, if it's accepted eventually as a medium of exchange, do you think it's going to be similar to PayPal?
Well, it already is similar to PayPal. It just can't allow for as many transactions. So right now it is trying to get to that stage to allow for more transactions than PayPal or Visa. And so SegWit was that first step, but the next step needs to be another one that allows it to handle as many transactions as PayPal or Visa. That's really the only thing holding it back from kind of taking over PayPal or Visa, but also just the user-friendliness of Bitcoin.
Yeah, I think security will be an issue.
Why?
Security or privacy, right?
Security, not so much anymore, but privacy is another thing that's being focused on right now. So it's a good thing you bring that up. Now that you have this big network, and in order for it to upgrade again, it has to reach consensus. Will people want more privacy, or will people want a medium of exchange next? And that's kind of what you're starting to see happen. Is you're starting to see more people that would prefer privacy before becoming a medium of exchange, but then you're seeing some people preferring medium of exchange over more privacy first. So it's kind of interesting what happened what's happening right now, and so you're starting to see kind of side chains develop, which are, it's a way to have cheaper transactions, but still on the Bitcoin network. And then you're starting to see kind of these privacy options where you can make offline transactions or private and anonymous transactions that are still tied to the Bitcoin network. So I can tell you of a way to make anonymous transactions on the Bitcoin network, 100%. I used to work for a Bitcoin wallet company that it was the best wallet provider in the world in terms of privacy, because they had the most features and functionality that allowed you to make private transactions. But not everybody knows about that. So you'll hear, oh, Bitcoin isn't anonymous, Bitcoin isn't private. It isn't for most people, but you have the option to make anonymous and private transactions. Now, that's one thing. And then medium of exchange, there are ways to make cheap transactions with Bitcoin, but not everybody accepts it, right? Not all the merchants are accepting Bitcoin right now. So that's why I still say it's in the store of value phase. So 3 functions of money, they naturally go store of value first, then medium of exchange, and then unit of account. So you price things with it. We're not, I'd say 5 to 10 years, then we're at Bitcoin being a medium of exchange. But still, I'd say for the next 5 years, it's still in the store of value stage. So you use it for like saving and sending like cross-border payments and stuff like that, but not just for everyday payments.
What makes you believe that Bitcoin won't get surpassed by other cryptocurrencies to serve other needs that Bitcoin is just working on now?
So that's why these other cryptocurrencies are coming about, because there's some people and groups of people that say, okay, Bitcoin isn't developing fast enough, so I want a currency that's cheaper, faster. That's what you're starting to see happen, but they're not as secure as Bitcoin. Now, so to answer your question, Bitcoin's decentralized nature is what makes me confident that it won't change. So that's why I was kind of trying to give you that example of why Bitcoin is so decentralized. If it wasn't so decentralized, these other cryptocurrencies can get changed.
What if these other cryptocurrencies are just as decentralized?
But they're not, and to history they haven't been to date, and if you look online you can see. So Bitcoin's biggest competitor, Ethereum, has been changed multiple times. It's been hacked multiple times. Other cryptocurrencies, they're not secure as Bitcoin because they're not as decentralized. So there's kind of it's more distributed rather than decentralized, but it is still run by a group of people or a centralized, it comes to a point. And even, so for changing, that's how it works as well. Like, in order for changes to happen, they're not having everyone agree on something. It's just kind of a group of people that agree on something, and they do that through using, it's called proof of stake. So the algorithms that the networks use to secure it, Bitcoin's algorithm is called proof of work. Ethereum, right now it uses proof of work, which proof of work is the miners, they run this algorithm that is called proof of work, and it's called proof of work because you have to use your computer power. So as I was mentioning before, when you use your computer power, you're also doing that to kind of get a reward, but by using your computer power, you're also securing the network. So Bitcoin has all this proof of work on the blockchain. So when I was saying in order to change Bitcoin, you have to change the cumulative proof of work that has happened to Bitcoin's network before you can start to even try and have a change. So, and if you grasp what I was saying, like at the beginning, I could mine using my laptop, but now the computer power is so massive that it's not worth it. And so there's so much computer power securing the Bitcoin network right now, but also cumulatively, that's what makes it extremely, well, now it makes it pretty much impossible to change the Bitcoin network because of all the proof of work that has been put into it. But other cryptocurrencies, they use what's called proof of stake. which is essentially voting with your money. Like you put a stake of your currency in the network, and that's how they vote and make changes. So if you look up online, proof of work versus proof of stake, you'll see what I'm talking about. But Ethereum right now, Bitcoin's competitor, it runs on proof of work, but very soon it's going to have to change to proof of stake because that's what was written when it first came out. So it'll be interesting to see what happens to Ethereum and all of these altcoins or other cryptocurrencies that were created on the Ethereum network when this change happens from proof of work to proof of stake. I don't see things going too well for them. But
What about Ripple?
yeah, so Ripple is an example that uses proof of stake. So it's extremely private, extremely centralized. It started with these banks in Japan essentially, and it's gained a lot of traction from banking type people because they kind of see it as something that they can control. Because those blockchains are very easy to change and develop. But the point I was just to try and kind of touch up to answer your question is proof of stake is not secure at all. So it's very easy to change and hack is the point I'm making. So these networks, long term, I don't see a lot of them being around because it is easy to hack them with computers, the most common form of attack is direct denial of service. It's called DDoS attacks, and it's pretty much you're overpowering the network. So we've seen examples of other networks and other cryptocurrencies get changed just by being overpowered because they don't have a lot of security behind it. They don't have proof of work behind it. So that's why Bitcoin is pretty much impossible to change now because of all the proof of work it has and because of how decentralized it is. That's how I would answer your question.
Do you think very, I guess, rich companies can buy up like a bunch of computing power, like, you know, like energy so that they can control?
That's what was kind of happening when I was mentioning miners being centralized at the time. A lot of money, whoever had money at the time and had the vision to see, okay, I can change the network if I have so much computing power. So that's what you kind of saw happen. You saw it get centralized because there was groups of people, rich people, that were trying to decide the future of the Bitcoin network because they had money. But luckily, this anonymous person came out with, that BIP 148 that allowed users to have a say in the changes that were to happen to the Bitcoin network. Any other questions you guys can think of?
What's a good wallet to use in Canada? I've used Coinbase before. I don't know.
So Coinbase is,
It's an exchange.
yeah, it's an exchange that allows you to buy and sell Bitcoin. Exchanges, they do have what's called a custodial wallet. So if that exchange were to get hacked and you didn't have your Bitcoins in your own Bitcoin wallet, they control your coins. So I suggest people to use peer-to-peer exchanges rather than centralized exchanges for more than one reason. So the first one, only centralized exchanges have been hacked when it comes to Bitcoin and Bitcoin networks because they know people have their money on the exchange, holding them in the exchange's custodial wallet. Peer-to-peer exchanges have never been hacked because most people hold their coins in their own Bitcoin wallets. So once you buy Bitcoin, send your Bitcoins from the custodial wallet you have in the exchange to your own Bitcoin wallet. If you have them on a custodial wallet, they're not your Bitcoin, so they control your private keys. So in order to send Bitcoin, what's used in cryptography terms is private and public key encryption. So you have to have your private and your public keys to send. Custodial wallets control your private keys. your personal wallet, you have your private keys as well as your public keys. So just think of private and public keys like this. Email nowadays. There's my email address, that's my public key. If you wanted to get into my email address, you need my password, that's my private key. So I suggest you download your own Bitcoin wallet so you have control of your private keys, which make them your Bitcoins. You can go on Google Play, whether you have an Apple or Android, and type in Bitcoin wallet, and there will be free Bitcoin wallets that pop up. Send me a message if you want to know the ones I recommend. You'll see there's more options on Android than Apple, because Apple makes it very hard to make changes to apps without backdooring it. So you're starting to see more apps being developed on Android. But you can also, without using an app, buy what's called a hardware wallet, which is not free, and it's not something you can download on your phone. You have to buy a piece of hardware that's like $100 to $300. You can